Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. This is your pal ZBH here, and I wanted to say happy Halloween, happy spooky season, and all of the like. I just wanted to make a special video, to get in spirit for the season and share some nostalgia with you guys and just have some good Halloween fun with you. Uh, this one, it's not like a highlight thing like I've done in the past where it's just one thing I'm talking about. This one I'm going to give you a bunch of rapid fire things that I used to watch that I still watch, when I can around Halloween. This video is just I'm kind of experimenting to see gauge some interest in my channel, see what pops, what people like, and if I get a good response from one of these things, I might cover it in more depth in the future. So, as usual, I'm experimenting, but just want to say thanks for being here. Happy Halloween. I'll be your horror host for the next, half hour or so. So, hope we have some nice fun and maybe some nostalgic moments for you, and you might discover something new. You never know. Alright friends, we're going to start off the list here. We've got 31 things here that are just nostalgic, fun things that I like to watch around Halloween. And this isn't in any particular order. It's not like number one is the best or worst or anything like that. It's just, here's 31 things that I like to watch around Halloween. So with that in mind, let's get started. Number 1. Billy and Mandy's Jacked Up Halloween, from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Now, I've talked about this show briefly previously when I did the Invaded special. I'm talking about that special episode that they did, but overall, I really like this show. It's very dark, very morbid, but very funny. And this is, I don't know, maybe my favorite episode of it, so let's get into it. So, based on the title, you're thinking, yeah, it's Halloween, so we get the point. But this it starts out as like a simple premise, but it kind of goes crazy once it starts. So it's Halloween, and Billy borrows Grimm's scythe while trick-or-treating, but he's led astray by an immortal trickster from Grimm's past who unleashes the power of the underworld to cloak Innsville in an eternal All Hallows Eve. Which, yeah, that's a really cool idea for an episode immediately. And the villain of the episode, the immortal trickster, aka Jack-O-Lantern, great villain, great character, played by Wayne Knight. So every time he shows up in voiceover, he's great. Not the last time you'll see him on the list, by the way. But yeah, I just really like this episode. It's got a lot of atmosphere. Like I said, it's got a great villain, and the plot is interesting. You get a backstory with Grimm that I didn't expect, which is kind of cool. And then the demented comedy that the show's known for is there in full force. And yeah, Irwin gets it really bad in this episode. Number 2. The Uncertainty Principle, from Spectacular Spider-Man. So Halloween arrives as a battle for power erupts between Tombstone and Green Goblin, and Spider-Man is caught in the middle of the chaos. So, haven't talked about Spectacular Spider-Man before. It's a great show. If you are a Spider-Man fan and you haven't seen this show, you really should check it out. So, just going to mention that now, but let's go over what this episode does really well. Overall, the show juggles characters and storylines better than most Spider-Man adaptations, with this episode being a masterclass in narrative payoff, seeing the ending of the arc between Tombstone and Green Goblin, and then great foreshadowing with the appearance of Black Cat and the symbiote. Number 3. Arnold's Halloween, from Hey Arnold. So this is a show that I really liked as a kid, and I've revisited as an adult, and I think I kind of like it more as an adult even. But anyway, with this episode, Arnold and his friends plan an elaborate prank on the neighborhood, but a misunderstanding creates an angry mob hunting down a supposed alien invasion. So this episode is an effective parody of War of the Worlds, complete with a parody of Orson Welles, and it's showing how a prank can go too far and how mass hysteria can wreak havoc on a small community. Number 4. Nightmare in Retroville, Jimmy Neutron. Jimmy uses his new invention to temporarily transform Carl and Sheen into realistic monsters. Trouble arises when the transformations become real, and Jimmy must find a way to return his friends to normal. This episode acts as a parody of several Universal monster movies with some great atmosphere and comedy. Okay, so now the next several parts of this are from the same series, but just giving you that up front so you know. The next 6 are all from the Terror Tales of the Park series from regular show. 5. Terror Tales of the Park 1. Now these are anthology episodes similar to The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, so there are multiple segments in each of the episodes, so we'll just go through them one by one. So in the first one, Pops' doll Percy takes on a life of his own, and arguably scary or just more comedic things happen. In the next segment, we see Muscle Man and High Five Ghost become trapped in a decrepit RV with the ghosts of a heavy metal rock band, with some very comedically bad music playing in it. And for the final segment of this episode, Rigby angers a wizard and is cursed to transform into a house, with Mark Hamill playing a dual role as Skips and the wizard, which is always fun. Number 6. Terror Tales of the Park 2. In the first segment, we see Mordecai's uncle return from the dead looking for a payback. It has a funny twist ending. In the second segment, we see Mordecai, Rigby, Eileen, and Margaret become trapped in a bus where time accelerates the passengers to dust, and we see Mark Hamill as a villain again, which is cool. In the last segment, we see Mordecai and Rigby hire a shady wallpaper installer who offers them a deal that seems too good to be true. And it might be an It parody, possibly. I mean, if you know anything about the ending of It, the ending to this episode's kind of similar. And this episode's a lot of fun because of the trippy visuals. Number 7, we have Terror Tales of the Park 3. In the first segment, Rigby constructs a bed that unknowingly houses the spirit of a dead serial killer, in a parody of Chucky, which is funny. In the second segment, we have where it's on Halloween night and gang vandalizes a pumpkin patch, incurring the wrath of its vengeful guardian. Again, Mark Hamill plays the villain, which he's kind of known for, but I just want to highlight it every time it happens in this show. In the third segment, we have Muscle Man and High Five Ghost dare Mordecai and Rigby to stay in the house as it's haunted by a poltergeist. And the poltergeist is named Jebediah Townhouse, and he is a hilarious character. Number 8, we have Terror Tales of the Park 4. In the first segment, we see the gang must appease a deadly creature by feeding Pops to it, kind of a parody of The Lottery short story. In the second segment, we have Mordecai and Rigby die but return as ghosts, and Benson must fire them to remove them from the land of the living. And it's a parody of The Sixth Sense, which is fun. In the final segment, we have Mordecai, Rigby, CJ, and Eileen get sucked into a cursed VHS tape containing 3 different horror movies that they must survive to escape. Kinda like Jumanji if it was a horror movie. Number 9, Terror Tales of the Park 5. This one's a little different. It's got 4 segments, so let's get through those here. So first segment, we have Benson trying to control Mordecai and Rigby with a puppet that appears to have a mind of its own. It seems to be a parody of Scarface and the Ventriloquist, maybe? It's kind of fun. In the second segment, Pops is transformed into a werewolf and framed for another's crime. And it has the song Werewolves of London and a very funny sequence at the end. In the third segment, we have High Five Ghost getting trapped in an elevator while attempting to reach his girlfriend, which may be a parody of the movie Devil. Possibly. Don't quote me on that. And in the final segment, we have Mordecai and Rigby are imprisoned by a witch and slowly turned into chocolate, and a parody of Hansel and Gretel. And number 10, we have the final Terror Tales of the Park series, Terror Tales of the Park 6. In the first segment, oh, by the way, they're all in space in this season, so yeah, that just happens. Just accept it and move on. In the first segment, the gang lands on an unknown planet where their worst fears manifest, which is an Event Horizon parody, which is fun. Second segment, we see Mordecai, Rigby, Muscleman, Eileen, and Skip search for candy bars in a house swarming with vampires, a parody of Planet of the Vampires. And in the final installment, we see an alien take up residence in the ship, and it proves to be a terrible roommate that the gang needs to evict. And it's just a straight up parody of Alien, but done as a comedy instead of a horror movie. Now on to number 11. We have Nightmare on Wilson Way from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. When a Halloween prank goes too far, Blue unintentionally unleashes a zombie apocalypse on the Foster's home. Now, this show is very bright and colorful and funny and, doesn't take anything that seriously. So when I watched this episode for the first time, I was surprised how dark it got. And yet it still maintains the vibrant colors and the zany humor of the series. I never would have thought they'd go that way with Foster's, but it worked out really well. And the ending twist is very funny, and I mean, just about every Foster's episode has an ironic twist at the end, so they were keeping that in tradition for sure. Number 12, we have Operation Tricky / Uncool from Codename Kids Next Door. So we got 2 episodes with this one, so I'll just break them each down right quick. First episode, Operation Tricky. The team makes a bet on who can gather the most candy, and number 4 intends to win, but Sticky Beard plans to hijack Halloween for the entire neighborhood. And this is just a fun episode. A lot of episodes have like a main number that you follow, like a number character that you follow, and this is a number 4 episode, and he was always one of my favorite characters, so it's a lot of fun. See him through like sheer dumb luck sometimes get a win, but it's very funny. Sticky Beard's one of my favorite villains, also played by Mark Hamill, so there's a lot of that going on with this list. And it's just fun to see all the pranks and stuff that happen on this episode. And then we get introduced to the character of Dumb John Silver, who's a pirate that works for Sticky Beard. He's just very funny, so that always makes me remember this episode is because of him. Now we move on to Operation Uncool, where the team answers a distress call and comes face to face with a horde of zombies in homage to Resident Evil and Underworld. And this is the first episode is kind of the more fun comedy episode of the Halloween special, and then part 2 is the more dark and scary one. I always think that's kind of cool when a show does that, if they have a 2-part Halloween special. But yeah, I like all the homages the show does to movies and video games and anime and all these different things. And there's also a Dexter from Dexter's Lab cameo in it that's really funny. And moving on to number 13, we have Hook, Line, and Screamer from Total Drama Island. And in this episode, the contestants must survive slasher movie tropes to gain invincibility, but an unexpected twist puts the campers in real danger. And I really like this show. It's a very nostalgic show for me, and this is always one of my favorite episodes, because you basically get a short horror comedy movie with a fun twist ending. Moving on to number 14, Grundy's Night from The Batman, 2004. So the urban legend of Solomon Grundy appears to have come true on Halloween as Batman investigates several attacks, but appearances can be deceiving. I have to say, everything about this show's art style and its character design work is so good, and it allows for great horror aesthetics, like Grundy's design in this episode, and then the vampires in the Dracula movie, and every time they do anything horror-esque, it's great. Moving on to number 15, Along Came a Spider from Transformers Animated. And in the episode, Optimus's past comes back to haunt him as the Autobots accompany Sari on Halloween night. I just have to say, I really like Transformers Animated. It's one of my favorite incarnations of the Transformers, and this episode really highlights why I love this version of Optimus, because you see all of his flaws when he's revisiting his past and all of his failed relationships, and really adds a lot of depth and sadness to his character that's rarely seen in the franchise. And on to number 16, Fright Night Fight from Jackie Chan Adventures. And in this episode, Paco accidentally puts on a cursed Oni mask and becomes possessed by the power of the Shadow Khan. Now, a little background, I love Jackie Chan Adventures. It's a super fun show, and every time I revisit it, I enjoy it a little more. This episode fits perfectly with Halloween. It's during the Oni mask arc, and whenever someone puts on the mask, they gain control over the Shadow Khan. Super cool concept, and Tarakudo and the Shadow Khan make for great villains for a Halloween episode specifically. Number 17, Scaredy Cat from Cat Scratch. Now this is a really obscure show nowadays, but I made sure I wanted to mention this show for sure. And in this episode, the cats battle their rivals for supremacy on Halloween, but unintentionally cause an alien invasion. So this show is just very wacky and funny, and has all the main characters I really like. Gordon Waffle, Mr. Blick, and Hovis. They're all great. Their actors do a great job as the characters. In this episode specifically, Gordon is the MVP. And it's really cool to see Rob Paulsen and Maurice LaMarche get to play dual roles in this episode. Moving on to number 18, we get a Scooby-Doo Halloween from What's New Scooby-Doo. And I was going to say, yeah, What's New Scooby-Doo is great. If you're a Scooby-Doo fan, it's up there in the show's rankings, and yeah, I grew up with this one, but it's also a lot of fun to visit as an adult. In this episode, it's a festive tale of family, friends, freaky scarecrows, and a special guest appearance by Kiss, which is such a weird combination, but it really works. It's weird how well it works. So this episode is very strange because it's an episode, my modern-ish episode of Scooby-Doo with a laugh track, which hadn't been used in a long time. I'm not sure why they used it with this episode, honestly. And then there's some surprisingly mature humor and a funny and surprising conclusion at the end, so it's a whole lot of fun if you're in the mood for a Halloween Scooby-Doo adventure. Moving on to number 19, we have October 31st from Kim Possible. Now, Kim Possible was a show it was on back in the day that I didn't get to see much of, but everything I saw of it I liked. I actually revisited it earlier this year, and I really liked the series overall. So with that out of the way, let's get to the actual episode. So an experimental body armor causes trouble for Kim during a stressful Halloween night. Now the setup is really simple to this episode, but it's the execution that I really like, because it's a simple morality tale with a lot of fast-paced action, and it's the hero getting put through a serious challenge. And it's a morality tale without feeling preachy, which is great for a kid's show. Moving on to number 20, we have the Halloween Bash from American Dragon Jake Long. And overall, I really like American Dragon Jake Long, and just revisited it recently, and I still really like it as an adult. In the episode, we see Jake host a Halloween party where the human and monster worlds collide. And this episode's really interesting because Jake is put to the ultimate test when he must pass the council's trial and save them without the use of his powers. So you take a guy with iconic powers like Jake, and then you take away his powers, it makes it a lot more challenging, which is super fun. Next, we move on to number 21, Hallobeenies / Meat Man from Camp Laszlo. In the first episode, Halabeenies, we see the jelly beans try to trick or treat, but only manage to torment Scoutmaster Lumpus. And this episode really makes me question how long the Bean Scouts are supposed to stay at camp if they don't leave till October. That's neither here nor there. It's a really fun, funny episode that has some nice atmosphere and a couple of spooky moments, so it's a good for Halloween. In the second episode, we have Meat Man. And in this, the Jelly Bean Trio creates a doll from canned meat that appears to take on a life of its own. Now, remember when I was talking about Kids Next Door earlier, how I like it when a Halloween episode does a funny segment and then a scary segment? That's this episode too, where Halabeenies is funny, but Meat Man is the more horror episode. And the twist ending with Meat Man about the campfire story, it's really funny. And pretty dark, actually. On to number 22, we have Only a Dream from Justice League. And in this episode, an aspiring criminal gains terrifying mental powers that he uses to torment the Justice League in their dreams. Now, this is just a very dark but very fun episode of Justice League. It's two-parter technically, because all of the first seasons of Justice League were two-parters, just so you know, going in. But I really like the villain, Dr. Destiny, and this is a good interpretation of this character. I wish he would show up in more things, honestly. But I just like the idea of him attacking them all in their dreams and seeing what each of the characters is most afraid of is really interesting. And the final battle in the episode between Destiny and Batman is peak DCAU writing. On to number 23, Haunted from Teen Titans. And in this episode, Slade tortures Robin with psychological horror from beyond the grave. And just gonna say, Teen Titans is really a great show, and Slade is a great villain for the show specifically. And at this point in the series, you think that Slade is dead because you saw him, it looked like he died in the end of season 2. But this episode makes you question everything. Because you don't know what's real, you don't know what's imagination, you don't know, it's blurring the lines so effectively that you're kind of in Robin's shoes, honestly, because you don't know if Slade is actually alive and still doing what he did before he died, or if you're going crazy. That just does that really effectively. I like this episode because it highlights that Slade's influence reverberates throughout the series even after his death. It showcases how effective of a villain he was. Moving on to number 24, we have Fright Night from Danny Phantom. And in this episode, we see, attempting to outdo his bully, Danny enters the ghost zone and unleashes the spirit of Halloween on Amity Park. So overall, I really like Danny Phantom as a show, and it's a fun show to revisit. I wouldn't say this is the best episode or anything, but I just like the atmosphere. I like the Fright Night as a character, and he's actually very important. His goal is voiced by Michael Dorn, and he's an interesting villain that ties into the deeper lore of the Ghost Zone. So, this is his first appearance, but he shows up several times later in the series, so he is a very important character. So before we go any further, the next 3 entries on this list are not actually episodes. They're actually films. Not particularly long films, but just wanted to mention that before you go in to watch any of these. Number 25, we have The Halloween Tree. And this is a charming tale of a group of friends going to the ends of the earth and time itself to save their friend from an untimely death. And you can tell this was animated back in the 90s. It's got beautiful background animation, really cool atmosphere. Everything about the animation is gorgeous. I just love the story of this movie so much, and it about friendship and friends going through everything to save their friend. I really like that. And it's a good, wholesome Halloween story that I've always resonated with. I do want to say that the villain, I'll use air quotes on that word, but the villain of the movie Mound Shroud is such a fun character, and like he's more of I'd say an antagonist than a villain. So like there's a little bit of a distinction there for the group, but he also becomes their mentor, which is really funny to seeing him get so annoyed at these kids through the whole time. Like he's gonna claim that kid's soul no matter what, but he's gonna have some fun with the others at their expense too while he's doing it. And he's played by the late great Leonard Nimoy, giving a great performance. So I just wanted to highlight him specifically. Moving on to number 26, we have R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. Don't Think About It. And in this film, we see it as a precursor to the beloved TV series, showcasing an angsty girl that unleashes a terrifying creature from a book, hoping to scare her brother and her bully. So I know it's a shorter movie, and this is actually a live action thing. It's maybe the only live action thing on this list now that I think about it.
Whoops!
But I really like this. The story's really simple, really effective. Love the design of the creature, and some of the horror sequences in the movie are really effective, including one I didn't notice until I was an adult. Noticed something going on in the background in one scene that maybe I can highlight in this video if copyright will leave me alone. But this movie has a great cast, it has an interesting premise, and a memorable monster, which, by the way, was designed by Greg Nicotero. And if you don't know that name, he's been in horror movies and TV shows for a long time. He's worked on things like The Walking Dead and the Creepshow series, so pretty cool. That explains why the creature looks as good as it does. And moving on to number 27, we have Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Now, this is the thing that Scooby-Doo fans are kind of united in, is that this is the best Scooby-Doo movie. And I wholeheartedly agree, but I just want to make sure I spotlighted this one because anybody who's not like a Scooby-Doo fan, I kind of want to show them this movie because it's different, you know. It hits different, as the kids say. But in this movie, it's a dark, subversive, and terrifying take on the classic Scooby-Doo formula, and has a banger soundtrack. I mean, as long as you like 90s stuff, then it's a banger soundtrack, which you should. But anyway, the film contains some of the best antagonists in the franchise, and one of the best twists in the series. Oh, and it's legitimately horrifying. Like, I remember watching it with adults that they didn't expect it to go as dark as it did, and I just, you know, being a kid sitting over there watching it, just watching their reaction was just a lot of fun. To number 28, we have Scaredy Pants / I Was a Teenage Gary from SpongeBob SquarePants. So the first episode, we have Scaredy Pants, and it's a simple comedic tale of a scaredy cat trying to scare others, which also features the debut of the ominous Flying Dutchman. And overall, it has great atmosphere and comedy, and a pretty dark twist in the ending, which I won't spoil here. And now we move on to the second one, I Was a Teenage Gary. And a lot of people don't talk about this one. It's kind of forgotten compared to the first one, but I like it just fine. Mainly, it teaches you two lessons. Basically, don't trust Squidward with your pet, first of all. And the second thing is, don't inject yourself with a foreign substance, or you might turn into a genetic abomination. Alien Romulus. To number 29, we have Halloween from King of the Hill. And in this episode, we see a war between nostalgia and moral panic rage over the fate of trick-or-treating in Arlen. And this is just a very interesting episode to watch as a avid enjoyer of Halloween and a Christian myself. This is a very fun episode and kind of frustrating too, where the villain of the episode is Miss Junie Harper, is fundamentalist Christian nutcase that tries to run everybody's fun. That sad thing is, everybody knows a Junie Harper if they live on Earth long enough. And I just want to say she is a great. As much as I don't like her as a character, she is a great antagonist, showing the truthful look at the Christian attitudes of that era, late '90s. But also, it still persists to this day, so it's still pretty relevant, unfortunately. And it's pretty funny because it's Sally Field as the guest star playing the character, and it's like, if you ever imagine Sally Field playing Dolores Umbridge, that's basically this character. Now we move on to number 30, White House Weirdness from Time Squad. Oh boy, this is an obscure show. Like, one of the most obscure shows, so if you've seen it, please let me know, I'm curious. But this is a very fun series where it's basically a time cop and a robot adopt a small child, and they go throughout the timeline fixing problems and anachronisms. And it's just a zany character comedy, but it's very funny. And this episode is one of my favorites because it is a perfect parody of Scooby-Doo, and it has guys dressed up as monsters. It has the soundtrack. It has the chase scenes. It has the music. Like, everything is perfect in the parody to Scooby-Doo. And I have to say the art style of this show is very strange. So, like, just the human character designs look very odd. So whenever you combine that with the ghoulish reimaginings of the monsters in this, it's really fun. Seeing, like, dead presidents dressed up as classic movie monsters. It was so great. Moving on to number 31, the grand finale, and honestly, you're probably surprised that it took me this long to talk about it, The Haunted Mask from Goosebumps. In this story, we see young Carly Beth purchase a terrifying Halloween mask that begins to alter her personality when she wears it. And eventually it gets stuck onto her face, and a nightmare ensues. So, yeah, this is a classic for a reason. It's one of the best books, and one of the scariest books too, and episodes of the series. It acts as a morality tale of love and self-acceptance. And I just remember reading the book when I was a kid for this, and it scared the shit out of me. Like, it's weird that book of all books was the one that scared me, probably the book that scared me the most that I've ever read, but masks shouldn't start talking and floating towards you. That's just terrifying. Well, friends, thank you for taking this special journey with me this Halloween through Halloween's past, and I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, let me know, and if I get a good response from this, I might do something like this again in the future. But thanks for watching, and before we go, I wanted to give you a little gift from me to you for this Halloween season. I got this book that I wanted to read a passage from, and just to spread the love this Halloween, so here we go. It's called The Evil Thing, and it reads, "The evil thing is a gruesome beast. On living flesh it loves to feast. It's a two-headed thing whom you don't wish to greet. One head sucks your blood, one head chews your meat. It carries its babies in slimy eggs on its back. The babies are hungry when they hatch for a snack. So the evil thing traps some poor victim alive for the babies to eat when their birthdays arrive. But don't worry, don't cry, please don't have a fit. The evil thing is not real unless you think about it." Happy Halloween.